spectacular tales told by defectors. Before the invasion, the New York Times' Judith Miller would write 6 prominent stories based on their testimony.
Ahmed Shalaby is a controversial leader of the Iraqi opposition.
And still on the web, a report about the defectors, narrated by Judith Miller and produced by New York Times Television for the NewsHour on PBS.
Well, Judy Miller had been an old friend of Chalabi, did a lot of the stories on Chalabi, was very favorable to Chalabi.
James Bamford found out that in 2001, Chalabi had arranged for Miller to meet in Thailand with a defector from Iraq named Al-Hadari.
So Al-Hadari was in Bangkok. Judy Miller flew there to interview him. The New York Times ran a front-page story basically confirming everything the administration had been saying about Iraq.
Al-Hadari said he was a Kurd from northern Iraq. He told Miller the Iraqis had hidden chemical and biological weapons, some, Miller reported, right under Saddam's presidential sights. The story spread far and wide.
The New York Times remains immensely influential. People in the TV world read it every morning, and it's amazing how often you'll see a story go from the front page of the day's paper in the morning to the evening newscast at night. People in government, of course, read it, think tanks, and so on.
There were some red flags that the New York Times story threw out immediately, which caught our eye immediately. The first was the idea that a Kurd, the enemy of Saddam, had been allowed into his most top secret military facilities. I don't think so. That was, for me, the biggest red flag. And there were others, like the idea that Saddam Hussein would put a biological weapons facility under his residence. I mean, would you put a biological weapons lab under your living room? I don't think so.
The first rule of being an intelligence agent or a journalist, and they're really not that different, is you're skeptical of defectors because they have a reason to exaggerate. They want to increase their value to you. They probably won something from you. Doesn't mean they're lying, but you should be not. Journalists are supposed to be skeptical, right? And I'm afraid the New York Times reporter in that case and a lot of other reporters were just not skeptical of what these defectors were saying, nor was the administration.
A former top Iraqi nuclear scientist tells Congress Iraq could build 3 nuclear bombs by 2005.
Well, now another defector, a senior Iraqi intelligence official, tells Vanity Fair in an exclusive interview that Saddam Hussein has trained an elite fighting force in sabotage, urban warfare, hijacking, and murder. David Rose wrote the story. He joins us now from London. Thank you for joining us.
In Vanity Fair's David Rose, defectors found another eager beaver for their claims. The glossy magazine, a favorite of media elites, gave him 4 big spreads to tell defector stories. The talk shows lapped it up.
What the defector al-Qarari, a former brigadier general in the Iraqi intelligence service, told me is that these guys, there are 1,200 in all. They've been trained to hijack trains, buses, ships, and so forth.
As you track their stories, they become ever more fantastic. And they're the same people who are telling these stories till you get to the most fantastic tales of all, which appeared in Vanity Fair magazine.
Their last training exercise was to blow up a full-size mock-up of a U.S. destroyer in a lake in central Iraq.
Or jumping into pits of fouled water and having to kill a dog with your bare teeth. I mean, and this was coming from people who were appearing in all of these stories, and sometimes their rank would change.
Moussaoui told us that he has verified that this man was an officer in Iraq's ruthless intelligence service, the Mukhabarat.
And you're saying, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. Because in this story, he was a major, but in this story, the guy's a colonel. And in this story, this was his function, but now he says in this story, he was doing something else.
The defector is telling Moussaoui that in order to evade the UN inspectors, Saddam Hussein put his biological weapons laboratories in trucks that the defector told us he personally bought from Renault.
Refrigerator trucks, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And how many?
7.
Leslie Stahl and CBS retracted their story a year after the invasion, when nearly all the evidence presented by defectors proved to be false. Vanity Fair's David Rose later said high government officials had confirmed his stories, but these were the very officials who had bet on Chalabi as their favorite man of war. To the Knight Ridder team, it all smelled of a con game.
What he did
was reasonably clever but fairly obvious, which is he gave the same stuff to some reporters that for one reason or another he felt would simply report it. And then he gave the same stuff to people in the Vice President's office and in the Secretary of Defense's office. And so if the reporter called the Department of Defense or the Vice President's office to check, they would have said, oh, I think you can go with that. We have that too. So you create the appearance, or Chalabi created the appearance, that there were two sources and that the information had been independently confirmed, when in fact there was only one source and it hadn't been confirmed by anybody.
And let's not forget how close these people were to this administration, which raises the question, was there coordination? I can't tell you that there was, but it sure looked like it.